Thank you. Good evening. I'm Councillor Michael Summersgill, the Vice Chairman of the Planning Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting of the committee. In the absence of the Chairman, I shall be chairing the meeting this evening. May I take this opportunity to advise you that if the fire alarm does sound, please remain seated and members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Tonight's proceedings will be webcast by the Council, but if anyone else is intending to record these proceedings, can you please let me know now? I ask this question not to stop you, but merely to ensure that members of the public in the room know that this is taking place. I would also like to advise members that they should only address the meeting by way of their microphones and to remind them to turn their microphone off when they've finished speaking. So, item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence.
Councillor Paul Wilby.
Councillor Spooner.
Thank you. And are there any substitute members?
Councillor English for Councillor Wilby.
Councillor Russell for Councillor Spooner.
Thank you both. Are there any visiting members? Item 4, there are no items recommended for withdrawal from the agenda this evening. And item 5, the date of the adjourned meeting, which is next Thursday, 26th of September. Due to the size of the original agenda, the following applications have been rolled over to the adjourned meeting. Application 24/501907 full, The Orchard, Copper Lane, Marden, Kent. Application 24/502003 full, The George, Benover Road, Yalding. Application 23/503025 full, The Vale Nursing Home, 191 Willington Street, Maidstone. Application 23/504311 full, Vinters Park Crematorium, Bearsted Road, Maidstone. And application 24/501092 full, The Gables, Warren Street, Lenham. Following a review of the agenda, further application 23/504522 full, the former Royal Mail Sorting Office, Sandlin Road, Maidstone, has also been rolled over to allow us to better deal with the item. Item 6. Urgent items. I intend to take written and verbal updates as urgent items as they contain further information relating to matters to be considered at the meeting. Item 7, disclosures. Are there any disclosures by members and officers? Councillor English.
In relation to items 2 and 3 on the agenda this evening, Kent Institute of Medicine and Surgery and St Mary's and All Saints Church, I am a member of Boxley Parish Council, but I have taken no part in discussions of these planning applications at the Parish Council level. Therefore, I intend to speak and vote.
The same applies, Mr. Chairman. Items 15 and 18, where in the first case I'm a member of Boxley Parish Council, and in the second case also Boxley Parish Council again, and Detling is also mentioned, and I am a Detling Parish Councillor. And again, I don't have any reason not to take full part in this debate, and I do not have a predetermined view. Thank you.
Can I just check those numbers, because on the running order it starts at number 1. Which ones you referred to?
So that is with regard to St Mary's and All Saints Church.
3.
With thanks to Councillor Jeffrey, that's numbers 2 and 3 in the running order with speakers at this evening's meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, disclosures of lobbying. And are there any disclosures of lobbying? I'll start on the left side.
On tonight's agenda, item 15 and item 18. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On tonight's agenda, item 18.
Uh, 17 and 23.
Item 18, Kins.
That's complete. Yeah. Thank you. And I move that the items on the agenda be taken in public as proposed. Is that agreed? Thank you. I also move that the minutes of the meeting held on 22nd of August 2024 be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Thank you. Thank you. Item 11, presentation of petitions. There are no petitions this evening. I now move to item 17 as the first item on the running order. Item 17 is the land north of Ashford Road, Lenham. Planning applications 21/504779 and 24/502496. This, there are no public speakers. This could be taken as a starred item unless councillors wish to speak. Okay, we take that on.
Propose the recommendation as amended on the papers then.
Thank you. Seconder. Thank you. Okay. Read. Thank you. Okay, next item, item 18 on the large agenda is the Kent Institute of Medicine and Surgery, Newnham Court Way, Weavering Maidstone, application 24/500175 full. I call upon Richard Timms, Principal Planning Officer, to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Just bear with me. So, yeah, this is an application for a car park with 229 spaces to serve the KIMS Hospital. It's just an aerial photo to get your bearings. That's the rough application site there in red. KIMS Hospital adjacent to the north, Innovation Centre to the east, and Newnham Court Shopping Village here, and existing parking for the hospital is around here, and there's a residential property just to the north of the site. In terms of the proposal and the layout plan, I just want to hopefully clarify the access arrangements that are proposed. So this is the proposed car park. The sort of long-term plan is for 2 access points. One to the what I'm calling the main area, the main car park here, and that would be from a new road to the south, which has planning permission, but it hasn't been built yet. So that's a sort of plan in the future, if you like. And the other is to the smaller area, the sort of triangle, and that's through the shopping village. So at the moment, you drive through the shopping village and you come in there. Because that southern road's not in place yet, the applicant's sort of temporary plan is to link through at the top here. So you come through the shopping village, you go through there, and that's how you get to the main car park. Because there's no guarantee that that southern road will be built, we've assessed both scenarios. So using both accesses or one, and that's what our recommendation is based on. So we consider it's okay either way. because there are sort of two different plans that have been submitted, sort of one with the link, one without, that's why we're seeking delegated powers, just to get one clear plan. We would carry out reconsultation, and subject to no sort of new material issues being raised, if members were minded to approve, we would approve under delegated powers. We don't feel local residents have been prejudiced because they have commented on both access points. So hopefully that clarifies what's actually proposed. And then just briefly run through a few photos. So this is the access from the shopping village. So we're right at the north end. This is how you'll get into the sort of triangular part, and the car park sort of beyond. I think it will take out that bund, but it's just beyond there. That's slightly further in. So the triangle car park's here on this side of the tree line behind. That's just looking back the other way. So the access from Newnham Court is through there. So this would be the triangular car park, if you like. And then the link is sort of just to the left of this photo. And then now we're on the other side of the trees, and the main car park is basically in this area on the top of the hill. And then that's a view sort of near the pub, edge of the car park, just looking back, and the main car park is sort of roughly here. So in summary, we consider the car parks justified to serve the predicted increased demand from hospital patients. It's required in connection with the hospital, so it aligns with the medical allocation in the local plan, and we consider its impact will be acceptable subject to conditions. There's two urgent updates, one that was from today. In essence, they amend or add conditions to the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two speakers registered to address the meeting. They both have 3 minutes time to speak to the meeting. They are Simon Cook and Lauren Sinden, the applicant's representative. Can I ask Simon Cook to come forward?
Right. Good evening. Start with, I haven't seen the urgent update from today, unfortunately. But anyway, I'll carry on and hope nothing contradicts that. What I'd like to say is we own Newnham Court, and I object to this application 24/500175/4, as the road would be used by fork trucks and HGVs very close to our house. A fence to stop nuisance has been erected, but that was only designed to stop nuisance from activities on the concrete slab, and the fence was not designed and does not stop nuisance from the use of the road by fork trucks and HGVs. The submitted application was incorrect, as part of the proposed access road, which runs alongside Gymfinity, should have been submitted as retrospective, as that part of the road has already been built without planning permission. I can first see this new part of road on Google Earth 2018 image, so this part of the road is not historic. This part of the road breaches the planning conditions for both the previous Kim's car park, condition 7 of 14/502439 and condition 8 of 18/503459, as these conditions said the area of land had to remain a footpath link. In breach of these conditions, the footpath was moved, and that part of the road was built without planning permission where the footpath should be. The part of the proposed new access road alongside Gymnicity is also not suitably used for the proposed car park traffic, fork trucks and HGVs. It would be dangerous to mix these types of traffic together in a confined area. It is proposed that the height restriction barriers are placed at both entrances to the car park. This would not stop larger vehicles from using the road alongside Gymfinity, and a height restriction is also needed by the front of the Gymfinity to stop large vehicles entering the area close to our house and where the road is not suitable for mix of cars, fork trucks and lorries. I request this application is withdrawn from this planning meeting as is incorrect, as it does not address the fact that part of the new proposed access road to the car park should have been considered as a retrospective application. But if it is not withdrawn from the planning meeting, I request that a height barrier is also located alongside the front of Gymfinity. This would not create any problems, as this application, if approved, would only allow cars to travel to and from the proposed new car park, as any other use of the road would still require planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask Lauren Sinden to come forward?
Thank you, members, for the opportunity to speak today. The application before you is for the creation of a new car park to serve St Kim's Hospital. The hospital has been serving the community since 2014 and is the largest independent hospital in Kent. Since its inception, the number of patients receiving treatment has grown exponentially, and the hospital has consistently supported the NHS alongside privately funded patients. As you will appreciate, healthcare in the UK has changed extensively since the hospital was first permitted back in 2008. Although new buildings or floor space have been added, outpatient levels have surged by 600% above those in 2015. More treatments are being delivered in an outpatient or daycare setting, enabling more patients to be seen more quickly. Many of these are Maidstone residents. In addition, the range of services and clinical specialties has increased to include numerous additional services, which are both patient and NHS driven. Because of this, the hospital is experiencing greater pressure on parking for existing staff, particularly during shift crossover. The use accords with the local plan, which allocates the site for medical campus and supporting infrastructure. The outline planning permission for KMC, which overlaps with most of the proposed site area, includes parking facilities. The proposal has been shaped by extensive pre-application discussions with your officers and statutory consultees, including National Highways and Kent County Council. All outstanding issues have been resolved, and specific details requested under delegated authority regarding the temporary access are being provided. KIMS has been a huge success. It is playing an increasingly important part in providing vital healthcare services to the local community. It is essential that staff and patients have sufficient parking so that they can focus on their own priorities rather than driving around searching for spaces. I hope you are able to support the officer's recommendation and grant permission so that we can move forward with this important infrastructure for KIMS Hospital and Maidstone District.
Yep. Just before we go to the ward member, just for clarification, reading the document, 616 on there, it is western. The smaller car park is on the western side, not the eastern side.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just a couple of issues I want to raise. I mean, especially on the back of Mr. Cook's statements, as well as Ms. Sinden's. Initially, the main concern with having the entrance road running through the Notcuts estate, I mean, I can totally appreciate that there are issues that can arise from having the main access road being through there, especially considering how narrow that area of land is. Any mistake with any lorries that try and access the site or any larger vehicles could prove problematic. And I know there's obviously plans to keep that road in place even after we've had all the KCC extensions and road development in that area. But obviously those can always change within the next couple of years, and I'm glad that there has been plans looking at both entranceways to that site. I would obviously like to push that if this is brought into a review, that the new road be the priority access to mainly use that new infrastructure that's going into place to make sure that we don't because naturally Kim's would need that extension of parking. I would hate to see Kim's turn into the next Maidstone Hospital with people waiting in the car parks for spaces to gain access to these facilities. I know the road obviously isn't in place yet, but if there are two separate plans, it would be nice to have a more defined definition of which access point is going to be used, specifically, again, pointing towards that new access road. Although, yes, it's not in place, I don't see any reasons why we couldn't acknowledge the plan and have it ready to go for when this infrastructure is put into place. Also, I'd just like to point out that on page 191, section 6.3, there is a section that states that along with the 12 spaces for electrical car charging, it is recommended that 50% of the car park actually be put into this charging state. This was brought up by the company that was obviously looking to implement these services. And I agree that I think that this section should be deleted, as the 12 spaces that are already recommended is more than enough for what the site needs, and 50% would go well beyond what is actually required or needed, and may even put the project at risk of being more expensive than initially planned. I'd like to thank the officers for having that highlighted and pointed out prior to the meeting, and obviously just supporting what I caught while looking at this. Other than that, I'd just like to very quickly mention that I think that nearly 18% on the biodiversity gain is a very nice number to see, considering that we don't normally get numbers that high. So I'd just like to thank you for that. But other than that, I think I've addressed all the points on that. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
I saw Councillor Harwood and then Councillor English and Councillor Jeffrey. In that order, thank you.
Right, thank you, Chairman. A number of colleagues on this committee will remember the very long debate in an earlier Kent County Council application for the triangle of land to the west of the hedge, when we were talking about lorry deliveries and the new delivery road, the new access road that Kent County Council applied for. And it's I don't know, the uses seem a little bit kind of mutually exclusive in terms of the lorry turning and the forklift element. And I think the local resident does raise quite an important point about that triangle of land, of actually getting to the bottom of its planning status. However, separate to that, I mean, the key issue is obviously the very large car park proposed on the plateau in the foreground of the Kent Downs AOMB. By day, it's soon going to have a superstore built in front of it, so it's rather kind of reduce the impact because it's going to be hidden behind Aldi. However, I think the lighting point is a critical one around impact at night, and I think I need to understand what the lighting conditions are, whether they're motion sensors, whether they're low level lighting. But we were so careful to ensure that the lighting for the existing Kim's Hospital was low key and didn't impact negatively upon the adjacent ancient woodland. I'd hate us to spoil it at the 13th hour, really, by then putting in a car park with less sensitive lighting. In terms of the landscape proposals, there are currently no detailed planting plans attached to this. There's a kind of illustrative scheme as to what will go in. And there are some illustrative species proposed. I think we need to be really careful about this, because we have got lots and lots of enforcement cases and discussions going on with developers all through this general area, where tree planting has failed and refailed, because this is about the most free draining and arid of sandy soil you can possibly get. And whenever they try to plant on bunds, the trees have just died. So you end up with lots of stakes and snapped off dead trees. I suggest that rather than spending lots of money on doomed 2.4 metre trees, as is proposed, the trees and shrubs should go in at a much smaller size, so that they can actually get their roots into that ground and actually establish. And you will find that within 5 years, one, that they will be alive, and two, they will be taller than even if they had prospered at 2.4 metres, because putting in big trees into this substrate, it's never ever going to work. It's just too dry and it's too free draining. And again, that comes on to species. The landscaping that was removed by Kent County Council for the highway works was really carefully chosen for these soils. It was things like broom and aspen and Persian buckthorn, just the kind of species that will grow in basically dry sand. So I think we should, even though we do talk about in the application, it needs to be trees which will work within this setting. I think we need to kind of specifically talk about some of the characteristic trees in the area. Things like broom, things like aspen, and shrubs like Persian buckthorn, to mix it up a little bit in terms of the species, so that we will have some species that we know will prosper in a very unforgiving area of land. But all of that said, I think with the perhaps delegated powers to landscape colleagues to deliver a landscaping scheme that will work and that will deliver and that will prosper, and with perhaps a similar for the lighting, to make sure it is the least intrusive it can be, but I can't describe the technological solution now. I'm willing to move that we do grant permission as per the papers, but with those small changes. Thank you.
Councillor English.
Yes, I would second that. I think with the changes that Councillor Harwood was referred to, there are some of the members may not have caught up with this, because there are quite a few urgent updates relating to this application, which do go into the detail of the electric charging points and comments like that, and also relate directly to the landscaping and drainage conditions. It is good to see the commercial success of a business in Maidstone. Whatever one's thoughts about private medical care versus state care, one likes to see the businesses being successful. And the fact is, however, that brings issues with it, and we need to resolve those issues. But this application has had a lot of consideration, and we are now down to the finer points of getting the detail right. The landscaping on this site must not go the way of previous landscaping schemes in this location and fail, because that will cause a great deal of nuisance to residents and also undermine the biodiversity net gain as well. And the lighting could be very, very intrusive. So it is important, as Councillor Harwood says, that we get those conditions correct. And therefore, the delegated authority is necessary, I think. Plus, we also need to keep it in our own minds that because this is such an important site, we do actually need to go back and check that the landscaping and the lighting is what we have approved and agreed, because there have been a number of sites, none as important as this one in my view, but there have been a number of sites where actually we've been very, very careful as a planning department and planning committee to try and get the details right, and that just hasn't happened. I would hate for such an important business in such an important location to end up in that situation.
Thank you to Councillor English. Councillor Jeffrey, and then Councillor Thompson has also wished to speak.
Thank you. I've got a number of concerns. Firstly, I know it's permeable tarmac, so but I do wonder why we're using tarmac, because it will still have runoff even if it is permeable. Can't say the word. And why Grasscrete wasn't considered, and particularly around the BMG. I know Councillor Nagy said 18% is good, but you know, I looked over this field yesterday because I was at the top of the Innovation Centre, and yeah, if we can't get a significant more BMG out of this, you know, we're not really trying. I mean, it is just a plain grass field at the moment. So 18% feels quite low in terms of what it will achieve. I am concerned about the need for it. At the moment, and I do get the role of KIMS in the current incredibly distressed healthcare system that we have. But we're looking here at something like a 2 to 3 increase of parking for KIMS, and that feels quite a huge amount more car parking, and in particular understanding how people won't drive up to the hospital, spend hours turning around, going back to the roundabout, going along to the other roundabout, coming back, and it's got the potential to get very messy when people are not focused on which car park they're being sent to in advance, for example. So I'm twitched about both the interim solution and probably even the final solution around the road coming in. It doesn't feel cohesive as a car park, and it feels too big. The final bit that worries me is the EV speed. Originally, I can see 22 kilowatts and 115 spaces. That's in effect been reduced by 97% down to 12 at 7. That's a huge drop in EV. And actually 7, I mean, if you're there for an hour with an EV and you plug in to a 7 kilowatt charger, you get 7 kilowatts basically of power, and that will usually for most electric cars to get you about 28 miles. Now, KIMS supports the whole of Kent, and if you've driven up from Thanet, you're not going to be parking there. If you're there for an hour for an outpatient's appointment, which you know is kind of normal for an outpatient's appointment, you're not going to get enough charge in your car to get home. So it kind of feels we've gone from, and I do accept 115, 22 kilowatt chargers is probably a little extreme in this case, but we've gone from one end to another, and I do feel that feels fundamentally wrong. So yeah, I have those concerns and one or two questions in there that would be helpful to understand, for example, around Grasscrete, why that wasn't considered.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Cabinet Member for Healthy Stronger Communities, including the Economic Development Brief, I have particular interest in viewing this proposal for our key development site as part of Maidstone's Economic Development Strategy, the KIMS Medical Campus. I hesitate, but I will nevertheless dive in to pointing some technical details, particularly, Mr. Chairman, in the knowledge of your professional experience. Please forgive me. I don't intend to embarrass myself or indeed show you up. I would point to one of our previous speakers who addressed us alluding to exponential growth. I think we need to check precisely what that means. I'm not sure that's entirely appropriate. And then having corrected somebody else, I'm open to be corrected myself. I'm looking at paragraphs 2.03 on 185 to do with the earth bunds around the car park. Also 6.42 on 193, and these pertain to condition 14 on 197, and 197 would be the appropriate place to pause at. I note that Councillor Jeffrey has already made comments about the permeability or otherwise of the car parking surface. The officer who introduced the piece observed that we're at the top of the hill where this car park site is proposed. The 3 paragraphs I've highlighted talk about the bund structure, the first of which on 185 says that the bund will be 2 metres in height. Now that's taller than me. I note that the structuring of the bunding isn't shown in the application. That seems important, particularly since Councillor Harwood has emphasised the sandy, free draining nature of the soil, if that's the right word for it. That has great implications for the stability of that ground under waterlogged load, pooling, the stability of trees, as Councillor Harwood has already pointed out. I'm concerned about these things, and as I say, I hesitate to point these out to expert commentators such as yourselves, but I do think these details need to be conditioned with the points in section 14. They are perhaps alluded to in the urgent update, but still not spelt out as to what the drainage and landscaping ought to look like. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor English, was there anybody there?
I think there are reasons why Grass Creek was not chosen here specifically. The drainage is much better than on the neighbouring Aldi site, so it's much less of a problem. The difficulty with a large amount of Grass Creek in a location here is it does throw up some quite significant safety concerns and considerations, which, given the potential clientele here, is probably not the best place to put it. So it has been given a lot of thought, and given the combination of the relatively good drainage here, and it is good compared to some of the neighbouring, well, compared to all the neighbouring locations, and the fact there are some safety concerns with Grass Creek on the scale you'd need it here, particularly with an elderly and sick population coming there, that this is why it's gone down this route. It's very site specific. I do hear some of the other concerns, but we would be struggling in terms of trying to maintain an objection on the scale or the principle or the scale of the car park in here, unless we can demonstrate considerable harm. And it looks to me as if the planning conditions, if properly implemented, would deal with that. And I'm sure, on a final point, that my colleague did not mean to suggest, although it could be misinterpreted, that he had an interest in this application. I'm sure he'd like to clarify that he doesn't.
Thank you. Before I get to Councillor Harwood again and Councillor Thompson, Mr. Cook spoke about previous planning applications and retrospective nature of some of the site. I don't see that mentioned particularly in the report, so I'd just like some clarification on that item myself.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I could come back. Retrospective application should be treated like any other planning application. It's not a ground for refusal, and until the government changes it, it won't be.
Thank you, but the references he gave were not mentioned in the report, so part of the site has different planning.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's other Kent County Council permissions, which it sounds some members are aware of. Whether there's breaches on those permissions about where HGVs are to load, that's a sort of separate issue. So that if there are breaches occurring, that would have to be raised with KCC. But for the purposes of the planning application tonight, and this is the layout plan, we're deciding on this car park, the hard surfacing, the buns, and the access to it is over an existing area of hard surfacing. If part of that doesn't have planning permission or it's not immune, i.e. it's not been there over 4 years, that is part of what we're considering, but it's still in this red line. So it's a car park with an access, and that's what we're considering and would be approving if minded to approve.
Thanks, Chairman. Just to come back on a number of points because they were sort of stacking up, really. On the biodiversity net gain, we don't have a policy in the local plan review for non-residential, which this obviously is. So it defaults to national policy, which is 10%. So it's 8% over national.
In terms of EV charging, we were checking today with our building control manager, and because it's a car park associated with a building, namely the hospital, it's covered by Part S of the building regulations. So we can't duplicate other legislation. We might want to, but we can't because of law. And it's interesting that the inspector actually pointed that out in recommending main modifications to us. I think we've discussed the Grasscrete. I think just, you know, it's what's in front of us at the end of the day, but I presume because this car park's going to be used 7 days a week, perhaps 24 hours a day, it's unlikely with all those traffic movements you're going to get the grass growing, simply because it's going to be intensively used. So what we've tried to do is concentrate on the quality of the landscaping. In terms of, as Richard has pointed out, we are actually requesting delegated powers in any case, because the plans, as Richard's gone into detail on, are quite ambiguous in terms of the sort of traffic circulation. And then lastly for me, yes, thanks for the detail on the landscape condition. We will make it a lot more detailed, so it's explicit. And we want to do the same thing with the lighting condition, but would councillors be looking for sensory lighting? Just a bit of a steer on what type of lighting, without going into too much detail.
I mean, if I may, in fact, if I come in now, perhaps with because it answers some of these questions. I think what we need is because of the sensitivity of the location, and that's not just in terms of landscape, it's also in terms of the hospital. We need the least intrusive solution to the safety requirement. And that may be low-level bollard lighting, that may be sensors. I don't know. I wouldn't want to prejudge. It's the utility of the approach. So I think that's to be left to officers and professional advice. In relation to the matter raised by the local resident, as Mr. Timms has said, that is not really related to this application. It is related to the Kent County Council historic application. And what I was thinking, the way for this committee to disentangle the two is perhaps once we have a decision on this application, we could then make a reference to, for perhaps enforcement, to investigate the implementation of the extant KCC permission for the lorries, if that makes sense. And then just as a couple of other issues, in relation to Grasscrete, I think we are going to have, as I say, people potentially wearing heels, people who are having to walk right across an extensive car park. That is the kind of safety imperative, I think. However, one of the critical reasons for going for this type of tarmac is its permeable nature. And the fact that we have a permeable surfacing means that we do not need to have the surface water drainage that, for example, has been permitted by the inspector for the Aldi site, which is going to discharge directly into a chalk stream, taking all sorts of pollutants and road salt and so on in there. This permeable surfacing is the most environmentally best option we had. So I think all of these issues have been explored in what has been a very long and drawn out application to try and get a solution because of the sensitivity of the site. So, you know, I come back, I think we should kind of vote upon the car park and then we can think about the KCC element.
Councillor Thompson has a hand up and then Councillor Cleater.
My apologies in my attempt to not take up too much of the committee's time, I do not feel that I have anything to add to the comments about the transport made with regards to the Detling shopper, nor do I have any concerns one way or the other about the economic development proposal. I hope that allays Councillor English's concerns. My intention was simply to beef up condition 14, and Mr. Jarman's kindly noted that point. Having said that, Mr. Chairman, now that I absorb the diagram on the screen before us this evening, it does seem to me that we should consider whether or not there are rather too many car park spaces, as I imagine negotiating that car park on when it's mostly full. It seems to me that it's bordering on becoming inaccessible, particularly in the left-hand lower left-hand corner. That seems to me to be challenging. So I wonder if we ought to be visiting that as well as the turning circle. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Cleaver and Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. The issue with the car park for me is very simple. We've got an application, we've had a recommendation. We all know what the traffic's like around there. But the one thing I would say, if you build a hospital, you know that there's handover and you're going to have double up. So that issue you should have planned for when you built the hospital. The other issue with the car park for me is it's whatever's the safest. The other bit, as Councillor Harwood said, is a completely different planning application, the KCC one, who you know I love and adore on a good day. But whatever happens, whether it's with lighting, whether it's how it's, whatever surface we're going to use, it's got to be safe. Speaking as someone who is consistently falling over these days and not through having, you know, drunk any alcohol, tripping and falling, and a lot of people who do go up to the Kims for tests, etc., are usually going for orthopaedic testing. So we just need to, whatever these is delegated to the officers, we need to ensure that people are safe. In terms of lighting, there is loads of lighting around there. You've got 2 hospitals with lights on 24/7. You've got the road lighting that's around there. So I think whatever form of lighting we have in that car park, the surrounding area is quite well lit, but it needs to be safe enough for people to use, but not be like you're in Stalag Luft 8 with, you know, big lights shining all the time. And I leave it up to the experts to work that one out and what's the best way forward.
Councillor Russell and then Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Chairman. The lighting details are going to have to be approved. The landscaping scheme is going to have to be approved. I think all the points, very valid points taken by my colleagues, underlining safety, obviously, because of the hospital, I will be taken on board and could see you writing them down. I think we've got a proposal on the table, we've got a proposer and we've got a seconder, so I suggest we move to the vote. Thank you.
Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of minor points. The lighting team may want to consider just shielded lighting so it doesn't expand beyond the immediate area, which is quite commonly used in car parks. And I'd just like to support Councillor Harwood's comments in trying to alleviate the concerns of our resident, Mr. Cook, wherever possible. So when this is going through with the conditions, that might be a consideration, please.
So is that a separate motion? Yeah. Once we've done the first one, okay. Just want to check with Councillor Nagy, your raised question about EVs. That have you sorted that reading the update, the change of EVs?
Yeah, the only thing I was looking to do was for that particular proposal for 6.3 was like the officers recommended, was to have it removed from the planning. Other than that, I think yeah, that was the main recommendation there.
And just to clarify, the car park there's one condition of the car park can only be used between the hours of 700 to 2200, so it won't be 24/7 facility. Councillor Thompson, the last point, please.
Do officers have any response to my gentle query about the density of spacing in the car park?
We find the impact of the car park to be acceptable. So, yeah, subject to the conditions. Thank you.
Okay, I'll move to vote on the application before you with amendments, urgent update and change of amendment of conditions 8, 11 and 12 and 4 additional conditions. That's on your update. There's that. And delegate and 2 delegations. Yep, on lighting and landscaping. Is seconder proposer for that? And seconder, okay, thank you. Those 4? Okay, that's everybody voted. Thank you. That one is approved.
And now that's out the way, I propose that officers investigate the extant KCC access road and HGV loading application that we received to just ensure that the safeguards that we agreed through condition are actually being implemented.
Second.
Do you have the reference numbers for those?
I could look it up, but you've got, yeah, okay, officers.
Councillor Jeffrey?
Sorry, just a quick point, Mr. Chairman. Could you, for the people watching online, just announce how many votes for and against for these, please? It would be helpful for those who aren't here.
Yes, the vote was 12 for and 0 against and 0 abstentions. We're now taking another motion proposed by Councillor Harwood, seconded by Councillor English. And the wording is?
And the wording is to ask officers to investigate the implementation of the previous KCC application to ensure that all the conditions and safeguards are being adhered to.
It was the HGV.
Yes, yeah, yes. And the officers have the reference number, so.
Okay, that's acceptable to the officers. Can I have a vote on that, please? Those in favour of that? Yeah. Unanimous, again, 12 for, 0 against and 0 abstentions. We'll move on to item 15 now, and if Councillor Cox wants to take a place on the committee. Okay, this is item 15 on the agenda. Reference 5077/2024/TPO St Mary's and All Saints Church, The Street, Boxley, Maidstone. I call upon Paul Hegley, Landscape Officer, supported by Lewis Bedwell, Landscape Officer, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chairman. Evening, members. First, tree item on the committee tonight is the confirmation of Preservation Order 5007. Firstly, just to say apologies, but the plan on page 28 is actually incorrect. The position of the tree is not where the red dot is. I only found that when I looked at the agenda yesterday and didn't have time to do an urgent update, but the tree is actually, you can see the plan on the screen before you, instead of being on the southern side of the church, it's actually on the northern side. So there's the public footpath or public right of way that runs along the northern boundary. The preservation of the trees almost on that boundary, if not directly on it, next to the wall. So apologies for that. But basically, just as a bit of a background to the preservation order was made following the submission of a notification for the removal of the sycamore tree. Probably explained it before, but very briefly, when an application is made in a conservation area to remove or prune a tree, the council has 6 weeks to look at that application, and within that 6 weeks, we have to look at it and consider whether the works are appropriate. If they're not, then the only way we can prevent the works from carrying out is to put a preservation order on it. In this instance, obviously, we've done the amenity tempo assessment, which we do on a lot of the conservation area assessments to evaluate the tree, its amenity in the sort of surrounding area and from public areas, footpaths, roads, etc. Obviously, in this instance, the tree scored high enough to protect. So therefore, the preservation order was made in order to prevent the felling of the tree. Obviously, in this case, just to show you the tree itself, there's a view of the tree from the public footpath from that would be the eastern side. So that's the sycamore there. Growing next to it is a fairly young yew, actually, if you look at it in terms of yew age. So the pair make quite an impact to the amenity of the area and the local landscape. This is actually looking towards the church from the western side. This is the yew, which is more prominent from that side, but again, the sycamore is hidden just slightly behind it, but again, still quite prominent from the main road. Obviously, the main reason cited in the removal of the tree is because of the problems that's been caused to the boundary wall, which is currently listed as part of the church. Obviously, it's quite clear on this photograph. You can see the tree's established itself quite close to the side of the wall. Obviously, the base of the tree, the girth of the tree, obviously the increment growth it puts on every year has obviously grown to the point where it is pushing the wall over. There's no denying the fact that it's quite clear that this tree is contributing towards the wall's demise. Here's from the footpath side. So this is the other side of the church. This is the public footpath that runs along the northern boundary. And again, this is facing the wall. The tree's behind the wall, and you can see here where the wall started to crumble away, and obviously these bricks, lower bricks here, have obviously pushed out. We've obviously considered the information put towards us in terms of the repairs to the wall. We've taken on board the fact that the amenity value of the tree is quite substantial in terms of what it provides in the area, and there's a number of trees along this boundary. And some larger veteranizing sort of beech trees further down, which are actually on top of the wall, which are sort of pushing them over. Now, it's always easy to argue this is only a sycamore and it's a weed and it grows everywhere. But if you look at a number of trees, in this instance around this area, there's hundreds of trees I could point out that are doing the same damage to boundary walls. And if we lost them all, there's a balance to be had. Now, that said, since over the last few days, I've been talking to the conservation officer to see if there's a way forward that we can work with the parish council and the applicant to see if there's a compromise to be had. And the conservation officer is quite keen to obviously see the wall retained and repaired, but at the same time would allow a gap in the wall to allow the tree to remain, so that obviously, say this section here would be removed and the wall would go to here and here to allow the tree to continue to grow, but have the repairs to the wall. So obviously, if this is something that the applicant or the tree owners would be prepared to look at, we'd be happy to help you on it. So the tree can remain and the wall can be repaired, or with it just a slight little gap in the wall to allow the tree to continue to grow without further damage. Thank you. So sorry. So on the papers tonight before you is to confirm the preservation order as it stands. Obviously, if the applicant still wishes to remove the tree, they can make an application under the TPO regulations to remove it, which obviously we will look at. But I think you know, if we're to keep trees, you know, like this, and there's a solution that would help and obviously retain the wall and the tree, I think it should be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hegley. We have two speakers on this. Okay. Yes, two speakers have asked to change the order. The first is Anne Brindle from Boxley Parish Council, and the second is Jackie Saunders as a representative of the owner. So, Ms. Brindle, you have, as mentioned before, 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good evening, members. In September 2022, Walkers reported that part of the wall on the northern side of the churchyard had fallen onto the footpath. On inspection, it was found to be caused by the sycamore tree lifting the wall and causing it to fall, part of it to fall. The origins of this wall were to keep grazing animals away from the churchyard. So with respect, the solution that you perhaps have put forward, if there's a gap in the wall, then the sheep that graze there regularly will then have access to the churchyard, which is open at the road end. As it is part of the listed status of the church, we feel that the wall must be retained in its entirety. The situation we now find ourselves in is that the church and its curtilage are Grade 1 listed. This is contrary to the information given to you in your papers, which indicate that the wall is not listed in its own right. This is not the case, and the listed status has been confirmed by the Diocese of Canterbury Secretary, who confirmed this to us, and I quote, "The protocol is that the wall is effectively listed as it falls within the curtilage of a listed building. The official entry, reference Church of St Mary and All Saints, Boxley 11857030, Historic England, states, unless the list entry states otherwise, it includes both the structure itself and any object or structure within the curtilage of the building. This gives us a dichotomy. As we cannot effectively repair this listed wall, whilst the self-seeded sycamore remains in place. The consultant engineer identified in his report of February 23 that the tree was immediately adjacent to the wall on the graveyard side, and in his expert opinion was lifting and pushing the wall up and sideways. This has led to extensive cracking of the wall structure, as you've seen in the photographs. This churchyard wall backs onto a public footpath, and Boxley Parish Council has a responsibility for the health and safety of walkers using this footpath. Possible solutions. Yes, we could attempt to repair the wall with the tree in situ, but the danger with that scenario is that we will be back before you in a very short period of time, as the tree will obviously continue to grow. Another danger with this solution is the tree roots being severely damaged while the necessary excavation to provide a substantial foundation is being undertaken. The consultant engineer recommends a minimum foundation of 450 millimetres wide and 500 millimetres deep. His report dated the 4th of February 2023 refers. The consulting engineer's preferred solution is...
Excuse me, 3 minutes.
Can I just finish the sentence?
Okay, yes, thank you.
That due to the tree's close proximity to the wall, that it will be best to remove it along with its root and stump. This will enable us to repair the wall in a traditional manner. Thank you very much.
And a very good evening, Madam.
Thank you, Ms Saunders.
Madam.
Take your time.
Mr Chairman and members. Let me introduce myself. I'm Jackie Saunders and I am Church Warden at Boxley Church and have been for the last 8 to 10 years. I can't remember which. And can I just say, before I do say anything, it was such a pity I could not hear the gentleman's comments prior to this talk, which was a great shame because obviously it's about the tree. So whether I'm allowed to have a copy of what you've actually said at some time, I don't know. But anyway, what I'm here to say is that on behalf of Boxley Church and the diocese, we are supporting 100% what has been proposed by Boxley Parish Council about the sycamore tree. Because I've been with the church so long, I have seen that what was a very small sycamore tree grow and grow and grow and grow. And it's been many years, I can't tell you how many years and times that I've actually mentioned to the parish council about the condition of the tree against our lovely ancient yew tree. My personal feeling is that it does need to come out. It blocks the light and it really isn't doing any good whatsoever. And I'm a person for trees, so I don't just say get a tree out for the sake of getting a tree out. Now, as far as the wall is concerned, that has been the pain of my life for quite a few months, in as much as I seem to be the first person that sees the bricks come out, or I'm told that the bricks have come out. And I've been removing them and pushing them back in and putting up emergency, cautionary tape and all sorts of things. That wall is quite precious to us. It's part of our heritage within Boxley and Boxley Church and its surroundings. That needs to be preserved in the way, exactly in the same way as it is at the moment. And I give full credit to Boxley Parish Council for the way that they actually look after the churchyard and the surrounding buildings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll wait until the speaker is seated. Thank you. Is there a ward member wishing to speak? Is it Councillor Thompson? Are you the ward member?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My remarks are in my capacity as a Maidstone resident, not as the Boxley Downs ward member. I have the greatest respect for the presentations that we've heard so far this evening, and I do not wish what I say next to be in principle contradictory. Nevertheless, with thanks to the officer, you might have noticed a confluence of 3 words: sycamore, wall and gap. And you may anticipate where I am going to go next with this. We're caught between a rock and some hard timber or something of that nature. I note that Boxley Parish Church and its environs is about to be the subject of conservation area assessment in the area, which I warmly welcome. And we, I'm sure, don't need to question any of the points and claims that have been made this evening about the significance of these assets. I am a sometime worshipper at Boxley Parish Church and the Pilgrim's Way churches, and the members of the community are somewhat known to me. It seems to me, if you'll forgive me for being rather less formal than is usually the case in this meeting, that we need to be arguing in the favour of the living rather than the not living, and stones can be put back, fences can be moved, sheep can be restrained, but as I think the officer pointed out already, what we have here is a living specimen. It is important. We cannot go around the country removing trees that are causing the collapse of walls, and for those reasons, I therefore humbly submit that we should be arguing in favour of the tree rather than the wall. Thank you very much.
In a way, this is exactly the sort of reason that tree preservation orders as legislation exist. Confirming the TPO would not necessarily prevent works even up to the level of removing the tree taking place. It would just make sure that those works were the solution that had to be followed and that procedures were followed and adhered to. So if it turns out that that were the only solution was the removal or drastic or other drastic works to the tree, although I'm not sure what else you could do in that sense, then it just secures that that's controlled. So it doesn't mean the parish council and the church could not remove it. Whereas removing the TPO definitely would lead to pretty much the immediate removal. I'm aware that there have been previous trees along this wall where the wall was not removed, and neither was the tree, and repairs were carried out. Now, whether the situation is completely analogous, I'm not sure, but there were works carried out to repair the wall in relation to an ash and a beach that were there previous, that were causing problems previously. So I think there could be a solution. I'm not sure where we are with working through that. What is certain is that if we remove the TPO now, the solution would be the removal of quite a nice tree. So I think at this stage I would confirm the TPO. However, it might be that I would change my mind if it turned out that the situation could not be rectified. And at this stage, I think we should confirm it to maintain control over what happens.
Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chairman. Though there is no precedent in planning, I am concerned that there are trees which form the part of church walls right across the borough. And more immediately, as has been pointed out by Councillor English, there are 2 ash trees and a beech tree, which are kind of part of the structure of the wall, just a little bit to the east of the application site. So where a precedent might apply is if the sycamore is singled out, what about the ash and the beech next to it? So that does start to change the landscape in a fairly profound way. In terms of that sycamore, it's growing in some fairly unforgiving, just solid chalk essentially in that area. And that tree has been around for a while, because I recently saw a photograph from my christening, and you can see that tree next to that yew tree there. So it was certainly there 25 years ago when I was christened.
Oh.
So yeah, so it's been around for a while. So I think that for all of the reasons that were pointed out by colleagues and by the officers, we do need to confirm the TPO. I mean, in fact, if you look at the churchyard behind, I always loved Belksley Churchyard because it was a really wild, the closed churchyard was always full of pyramidal orchids and was really quite wild. In the last 20 or so years, it has been maintained far more intensively. And I think there's a kind of change in approach, and I don't want to do anything which hastens that kind of formalisation. It's always been quite an informal churchyard, and if the wall's a bit tumbled down or a tree is absorbed into the structure, I think we need to go with the flow a little bit. And also worth saying, Councillor Thompson, as the ward councillor, was talking about this kind of difficult position around an inanimate object and a living organism. That tree does absolutely hum with pollinators in the spring when it's in flower. And I think, you know, we're in the middle of a biodiversity crisis, so we need to consider that. And in terms of the yew tree, the sycamore is in far more danger than the yew, because yew trees don't mind being in the shade at all. And yew trees also practice a kind of chemical warfare against any trees that get near them. You know, look under a yew tree, you don't see a lot of other vegetation. So I think in the long term, I think the sycamore will win. No, I don't. I think the yew tree will win.
Thank you. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chairman. Also, thank you, colleagues, for letting me to join the meeting late. I apologise. I do have one small disclosure to this item, but it didn't occur to me until very late in the proceedings. So this church sits in a benefice of which I'm treasurer of another church in the same benefice. Not heard of this issue before, but having said that, I sympathise hugely. What we find in our churchyard is that it's a closed churchyard, which means that the council's responsible for its maintenance, both the trees and the wall. And we find many trees just self-seeding. What we don't have is the resource to go and unpick them, and nobody does that for us. So before you know it, you end up with this, where you have trees basically disturbing the wall all the way along its length and all the little intersections. We recently went out for quotes in our churchyard, and I think it's relevant just to put it into perspective to how do we as a church fix that wall, and it's to the tune of £130,000 to fix it. So I find this one a really difficult one, because I don't think we can have it both ways. We can't have it that either trees are allowed to grow and then we just take out bits of the wall. We either maintain them and maintain, you know, and respect the wall, which I think is important for the reasons that it is listed. Or we take the consequences of the cost of maintaining these walls. That's my point.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you know, the argument this is a living being versus an inanimate object is very strong, and I wouldn't, you know, that's not an absolute decision point. There are clearly some cases where you would, you know, an inanimate object or a wall might have to take precedence. I don't think this is one of them. Councillor Harwood's clearly confirmed that this is an ancient tree from his christening, so it's got good value. But I'd basically like to just propose that we confirm this TPO, please, and I move that.
Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Chair. It's a difficult one. I actually completely agree with all the comments that have been made so far. However, I also respect very much the amount of love given to a local church, especially a listed one such as this, and the time and energy put into it from local residents. I don't think I've ever voted against TPO or chopping down a tree ever. I fully understand the parish council's concerns, and really to try and come up with something, if we were to vote against the TPO, then perhaps we could condition that Boxley Parish Council planted 2 trees of a similar site within their parish to try and accommodate the loss of the current one. I realise it's an ancient tree, over 25 years old, but I'm trying to get the best of both worlds here, which is very hard to achieve, I think, but that's a possible thought.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you. It comes down to the wall or the tree, doesn't it? But as always, I am worried about safety as well. And I think, you know, when the tree was on the south side, it wasn't very close to the footpath. But obviously, when we're looking at it and it is right by the public footpath, I am a bit concerned. I mean, it looks healthy, obviously, but the wall is part of that grade 1 listing, and in this case, I think for safety and for the grade 1 listing, I don't personally think we should put the TPO on there. I think what Councillor Reardon said about maybe if we could come to some agreement of with Boxley Parish Council to plant 2 other trees of a native species somewhere else, I think that might be a good compromise, what he was saying, because I think we do need to think practically about maintaining every bit of our heritage landscape, and for me that does include the listed heritage assets, which does include the wall. Thank you.
Members might be in danger of misleading themselves. If the TPO is not confirmed, there is no way of securing a condition for replacement trees. If the TPO is confirmed, an application could come forward for the works to take place, at which point we could say, in order to have the works take place, we put in 2 replacement trees. If a solution is that solution, I'm not saying it shouldn't be, we cannot achieve that by not confirming the TPO. We can only achieve that by confirming it and then having an application which will still come forward could still come forward to do the works under the TPO, at which point we could condition that.
Thank you. Councillor Russell.
I mean, yes, that's a very formal process, but I didn't actually say condition. I mean, they're in the room and they're willing and they're keen. So could we not just have a chat and get, a verbal agreement? I'm sure if we need to go down and double check Boxley Parish Council have planted 2 trees, we could do that. But I just don't think we need the tree preservation order. They should be able to do what they want with a tree to preserve the wall.
At the risk of prolonging this, it was referred to as conditioned by Councillor Reardon, not by Councillor Russell, but it was referred to, and I'm just saying that if we wanted to achieve that, we have to do it that way. Look, fact is, if we confirm the order, and this is the last one I say, we could still have that conversation. If we don't have some formal safeguard, I'm not saying Boxley Parish Council, goodness me, I'm a member of it, are going to do something shady or the church, but it's a bad precedent to treat an application on the basis of we trust this person and we don't trust that person. Generally speaking, one should try and treat applications by people on a level playing field, and I still think we should have the formal process in place. And
does the tree officer wish to say something? No.
I was just going to come back and say exactly what Councillor English has just reiterated, really, that the preservation order itself doesn't prevent works to the tree. It just means that the council has control over, when it's confirmed, has control over what works can be done to that tree. I appreciate that it adds more paperwork, more time to the applicant and the owners, and I do get that. And obviously, it's clear that the tree is the contributor factor to the wall. We've never denied that. We're not saying it isn't. What we're saying is that we would try and find a solution that would work both ways, that the tree can remain in the wall. And I get the point about the sheep. I wasn't aware of that. But it depends on the size of the gap that is left in the wall. I mean, I don't know how big sheep are and how small a gap they can go through. Right, okay. But there are other, I mean, obviously there are further trees down the wall that are creating gaps and that, so that said, if we confirm the order, then it would mean an application needs to be submitted to us again with the evidence again. And if you could look at that evidence and then come back and say, we can't do this, we can't do that, because the letter that was submitted with the conservation notice just said repairing the wall like for like, but it didn't go into detail or say whether there are any other solutions. If they're not, they're not. I'm not a structural engineer, I don't know, but there are other means and measures that we have done in this borough for other trees by putting lintels down that go across the ground so the roots aren't actually, you put into the rather than a foundation, a lintel goes across the ground. So you don't actually disturb the roots, and then the wall's built on top of the lintel. I mean, the wall's only it's not a retaining wall as such, it's not a really high wall, it's quite a low wall. So, and again, talking to the conservation officer, they're all happy with these measures or these lines of investigation if you so choose to do it. Thank you.
Councillor Russell?
Just a couple of points. Obviously, all of that does involve cost, application costs. Oh, free, okay. But my main point, what I was going to say is there is no current TPO on this tree, so I just wanted you to clarify. I thought it was putting one on. It says 2 objections have been received to the making of the order. Can you check which way we're voting and what's going on there?
Just as okay, just to go through, we'll go back again. When an application was, the conservation area protects trees. Any tree within a conservation area of a certain size is automatically protected. So anyone wanting to do works to a tree in a conservation area needs to submit what they call a section 211, which is a 6-week notification. So they apply to the council to give notice that they're giving 6-week notice to prune it, fell it, whatever they want to do with it. Okay. We have, as a council, 6 weeks to look at that work and consider whether the work's appropriate or not. If the work isn't appropriate, the only way to prevent the works from carrying out is to put a preservation order on the tree. So the preservation order was put on the tree, okay? So we put the preservation order on the tree within the 6 weeks to prevent the tree from being felled. Okay, now that order is provisional, so it goes on for 6 months. We as a council have 6 months to confirm it, to make it permanent. And what we're here tonight is to confirm the order to make it permanent. So the actual order runs out today. So if you don't confirm it tonight, tomorrow the tree could be felled. Simple. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm literally being a pedant, but that is very technically kind of the same thing I was just going to say, because I just want you to clarify when we are voting for, what are we saying? When we're going to vote against, what are we saying? I think it's really important on this one. Thank you.
We are voting to confirm the tree preservation order number 5007/2024 TPO without modification. And that was made on the 19th of April 2024. Councillor Cox?
Just as a point of principle, I find it really difficult that we're looking at papers when we've got to approve it tonight, right? It's just, we shouldn't be seeing this type of decision when our backs are up against the wall because there's a deadline.
The deadline, sorry, just to come back, a big pardon, Chairman. The deadline is not set by us. It's set by the legislation. We have 6 months to confirm it.
I hear that, but it would have been good to see this paper, not tonight, but a few weeks before.
Okay, I think we must move to a vote on this. And the motion is to confirm the tree preservation order without modification as per the approved order, attached order. Who's proposer and seconder? Or? Thank you. I thought I'd written that down. I have, yes. Proposed by Councillor Jeffrey, seconded by Councillor English. Can I have those in favour of confirming the tree preservation order? Those against? And abstentions? The voting is 7-4, 3 against and 3 abstentions. So the confirmation of tree preservation order is made. We'll just take a short break while the residents move. We're just waiting for the head of planning to return. Ah. Call you to order, please, for the next phase of today's meeting. Thank you. This is item 12 on the agenda. TPO application number 23/505330, 13 Brockman Place, Church Street, Maidstone. This application must be introduced as the council is the applicant. I call upon Paul Hegley, Landscape Officer, to introduce the report. Councillor English, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Gladly moving away from TPO, what's named now, onto TPR applications. So this is an application to do works to trees in Trinity Park. Actually, there's 3 trees that are down to be pruned. Going the wrong way. Here we go. They sit within the park themselves, more or less on the side of the boundary, but very close to the neighbouring flats there in Brookman Place. Let's have a look. First one is an ash, quite a large tree, as you can see in the photograph. Branches of the tree, actually, the crown extends quite a way over the flats and actually is actually resting on the corner of the building. Again, there's the lime, the ash is just here in this corner. There's a lime tree that's even closer, and again, the lower branches are just about touching the corner of the building and some of the windows, etc. On this one, this is the cherry. Again, is on the boundary, and these branches actually overhang. It's not very clear actually because the leaves aren't on it, but the branches are actually again resting on the roof of the building. The proposal in this application was originally to trim the branches by 3 to 4 meters back, but when measuring the trees on site, the dimensions given by the applicant were incorrect. So actually, by virtue of cutting them back that extensively, would create quite large wounds. So what we're proposing is lesser work to trim the branches back to give a clearance from the building to still achieve the branches to clear them back from the building, but not create so many big wounds and remove so many branches. So it still achieves what that works are proposed, but not to the extent of what was originally proposed. So therefore, voting tonight is to approve the lesser works to get the trees cut back from the building. Thank you.
Councillor English, your ward.
I was quite concerned at the original proposal for the reasons that the officer has outlined, because it would have caused some significant over pruning, to put it mildly. I think this is a reasonably measured response and appropriate with the revised proposal. I'm quite happy to move in.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Yeah, I should have said this, it's an NBC one. The Cabinet has not been involved in this in any way, shape or form, hence we're carrying on. And I'm very happy to second Councillor English's proposal.
Anybody else wish to comment? Councillor.
Yeah, I'd just like to, how do we ensure that only 15% is taken off?
Mr. Hegley?
The 15% is referring to a crown thin. Now, a crown thin is different to a reduction. A reduction is usually given by the dimensions in the distance that you are from the building or structure, or you give a final dimension of what the tree will be. Thinning is the density of the crown is thinned out by a percentage. So in other words, the actual shape of the tree is not touched. It's the density of the foliage that's removed So it's not so, in other words, if you had a tree that had a complete full canopy that you couldn't see daylight through, if you thin it by percentage, you then would start to see dappled light through it. But the shape of the tree and the size of the tree is retained. As best I could describe.
I mean, okay, someone gets up there, starts cutting it back. They cut it back more than they should. That's tough, isn't it, really? Is that what we're saying? I mean, you know, there's no way to control how much is going to be cut off, is there? Unless we're there watching it.
Well, the dimensions on here is reduce the width of the crown by 3 meters. We already know what the crown width is. So if they reduce it beyond 3 meters, obviously to say the crown width's 6 meters and they reduce it by 3, then we've got 3 left. If they go beyond that and we don't listen, but there's not 3, there's 2 meters left, they've gone 1 meter beyond what they should.
I suppose what I'm asking is what sanctions are there? I mean, if we say, yeah, you can do work on the tree and they do more than they should do, what happens?
If they do more work than they should, then we look at prosecuting. But what I would say is the contractors that we use, as in the council, are arboricultural approved contractors who I know very well, and I'm very confident that they will do the work that they should. And if they don't, then obviously we've been knocking on their door saying, caution, interview under caution. Okay.
Councillor Cleater? Okay. To approve the lesser works and the reasons for the lesser works decision as listed in this application 23/505-330 TPOA. Can I ask for votes in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. So it's 13-4 and nobody against or abstaining. Move to the next item. Another TPO, item 13 in the pack. This is TPOA 24/502221, Chattenden Court, Pennenden Heath, Maidstone. And this is to, let me just see. This is a crown lift of a ACER and reducing of width. Who's the board member for this? Yeah, sorry, needs to be introduced as the applicant, as it is Maidstone Borough Council.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chairman. This application is for the pruning of one ACER tree to the rear of 17 Chattenden Court. The tree is actually in the recreational area to the back of the properties there. The tree's there on there, T1. It sits right on the boundary of the property, so overhangs quite a way over the garden. The proposal put forward is to raise the canopy to 3 meters, and by that we're saying all branches below 3 meters will be removed, so the height clearance will be 3 meters, again, which we can specify. Cutting back of some of the branches that overhangs is not quite clear, but on here, these ones that overextend over the garden will be trimmed back just to sort of clear the garden boundary line a little bit. So basically these lower branches will be removed to give obviously the person's garden some more light underneath for their shrubs and their pruning their trees. Pruning this branch back that overhangs, and then again thinning the crown to remove any crossing rubbing branches, any dead wood, etc. that was in the crown, so the foliage again is lighter and not so suppressive for the neighbour, for the neighbouring properties. And obviously on the papers is to approve as per the papers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hegley. The ward is Councillor Harwood.
Just like to move the recommendation on the papers.
Seconded.
Seconded by Councillor English. Anybody else wish to say anything? Okay, we'll go to vote on that then, please. Those in favour? 13-4, 0 against, 0 abstentions. Thank you. We move to the last item on the agenda for today. Item 14, TPOA of trees along the River Len footpath 24/502178, which must be introduced by Paul Hegley as the council is the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Last application, again, is for various, there's 19 trees in various different positions along the River Len footpath. Members may recall, I think the last time we were at committee, there was another tree down there that had some pruning. They've since had a survey done or an inspection done of the trees along that pathway and along the river there. And obviously hence this application in front of you tonight. Most of the work, or nearly all of the work, is subject to sort of trees that show defects or have defects, or trees that have fallen. A lot of them, some of them have fallen actually across the river, and obviously they're obliged to remove that, obviously for flooding purposes, etc. So many of the trees actually on this application are probably exempt because of the condition that they're in terms of safety. But obviously being a council application, it's obviously deemed to be taken to committee. Obviously these are all the different positions of the trees dotted along the footpath there, so they're quite a long length of different trees in different places. But just to sort of give you an idea, a lot of the trees that they're looking at working on are trees that are either coppice, i.e. lapsed coppice trees of willows and hazel and stuff. And by virtue of that, I mean, obviously they're multi-stemmed, and a lot of them have got so old that the stems have started to decay and they're starting to fall across the footpath, which is one of the willows here that extends quite wide and has actually had a limb break off before and had cleared. So what they're looking at doing on many of these is coppicing or recoppicing them to make them regenerate, but obviously remove the overhanging branches from the footpath. So that's that's part of the pruning. The other works is to remove a number of dead trees. There's a number of ash that have obviously unfortunately succumbed to ash dieback, which are really in quite a bad state. Some have already fallen across the river and caused the river to blockage in certain places. This one is an alder that's died on the other side of the bank of the river, but was in falling distance of the footpath. Again, this is obviously wildlife habitat. Obviously there's informatives on there that obviously the cordwood will be stacked on site habitat piles. The trunk of this particular alder tree will be retained as a monolith. So obviously all the wildlife and the ivy growth, etc., which again harbours a lot of wildlife. It's a later flower in the winter as well, in the summer as well, which is good for bees, etc., will be retained. The ash trees were on the paper were actually to be felled, but we've suggested that a condition is put on as condition 1, that the actual trunks are retained as monoliths rather than being felled to ground level. So again, if it's safe to do that next to the footpath, the trunks will be retained at specific heights that are safe to do so, and hence the condition 1 for that purpose. Again, this is just some of the photographs showing this is the fallen ash across the river. Again, this is just to be cleared from the river, and the actual main trunk will be retained on site for wildlife. This is another example of a willow that's partly fallen, and obviously this is the footpath that runs across here, where people have to duck under. Again, obviously, if this fails and goes straight across, it actually has been there for quite some time because obviously you see these upright stems, so the growth has actually grown there. And again, this one has actually uprooted from the edge of the river and is actually leaning quite badly over the footpath. So again, the idea is to recoppice this at ground level for it to regenerate back. So it's not actually going to be felled. So it will be retained. It's just going to come back and being a willow, I expect quite some good growth on that in the coming year. This is a sort of lapsed hazel, again, over the footpath. And the idea is to recoppice these stems that lean right over the footpath and are quite low. So again, obviously, mostly safety works, which, as per the papers, we recommend for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hegley. As a former tree warden, I'm pleased to hear all this work done in the correct way. Councillor Harwood, are you the local ward member or not?
Not quite, but I'm happy to move that we grant permission. We don't have the ward councillor here, but it's near enough.
Councillor, I noticed Downswood Parish Council had no comments received, and adjacent properties also made no comments. So I believe most people wish this to be walkable. Can I have a vote, please, on the proposals? Those in favour? Okay, that's unanimous. 13 for, none against, no abstentions. Final item on the agenda, item 24, appeal decisions. I call upon Rob Jarman, Head of Development Management, to introduce the report on the appeal decisions.
If it's okay, Chairman, could I leave it till the following committee next week?
Yes, I don't believe we need a vote to postpone.
Thank you.
And therefore, close the meeting at 7:49. Thank you all for attending.
Chairman, in the past, sometimes we take away our papers and then we get sent more papers, whereas we know this is a split meeting, so presumably we just keep hold of our papers and we won't be sent some as well. Yeah, right.